Hello everyone, my name is Elijah, and this video is going to cover the basics of modeling a building in Revit, as well as preparing it for post-production and rendering. So we're not going to go too in-depth about modeling in Revit, because it's mostly for a studio project and not like a model that you would be using professionally for construction documents, so we're not going to be drawing construction details, we're not going to be going too in-depth about wall types or like where you want to locate your walls based on like the structure. But in this video, we are going to cover what you need to know um, for creating a rough building model. So we're going to be placing in walls. We're going to learn how to use a room tool to estimate square footage of the areas that you create with those walls. We'll learn how to put in floors. We'll place in openings like doors, windows, curtain walls. We'll learn how to place in stairs and also railings. We'll learn the best practices for modeling your site in Revit. We'll go a little bit into depth about structural modeling because that is a point of interest for some people who are reviewing your portfolio for transfer applications if you do choose on doing it. We'll also learn how to place furniture and then apply materials to the entire building model. And then finally, we'll be going over setting up your views for post-production. So by the end of it, I will have covered enough content so that we'll have this building model in the end. And also a view similar to this that you can use to create a floor plan from post-production. So let's jump into it. All right. So I have my ground floor plan open in my Revit file, the working one, and I'm going to do a couple things to clean up this view because I don't want to see a lot of these numbers. So I'm just going to click on this DWG here, right click it, and then hide it. And then we have a nice clean space that we can draw from. One thing I also did was I assigned this view a scope box, just so that it's more of a crop view. And yeah. So to draw in a wall, there's a wall button up here. And there's a bunch of different types of walls you can choose from to draw in. But for now, we're just going to use the 8 feet, the 8-inch thick basic wall. And we're just going to draw it off in our space here. So now that we have our walls placed in, there are a couple things you want to pay attention to. And if I click on a wall here, there's a bunch of different settings that you can adjust. So you want to pay attention to the base constraint and the top constraint, because the base constraint is where the wall starts, and then the top constraint is where the wall ends. So if I go into a 3D view, you can see that it begins at the ground level and then it stops at the second floor. If I unassign it and then put it up to the roof, it's going to go up to the roof. Oops. So I'll set it back to the second floor, and then I'll kind of draw out more of an outline of my space. When it comes to angled walls, they are a little bit tricky, and a piece of advice is you want to keep your angles whole numbers and somewhat reasonable to work with. So I like to use detail lines to maybe draw a very rough outline of where my walls will go. So if I type DL for a detail line, and then just click off into the space here, and let's say I want my reference walls to be maybe match or be parallel with this road over here, I'll just estimate it to be at about 55 degrees. And you can see the setting right here. That actually doesn't look very parallel, so maybe I'll change it to about 60. And then now I'm going to use this detail line as a reference to draw my walls. So I'm going to type on the wall command again, click on this line here as a reference, and then just draw off to my space. Kind of like that. If you get this warning, you can use the trim technique to make sure these walls butt together. So if I type TR and click both walls, makes them connected. Now to draw a wall on your second floor plan, you will just go into your working second floor plan view. I'm going to hide that DWG again. And you can see that the first level walls are shown as an underlay. So you can't select them in this view because they're in the level below, but you can still, if you were to draw a wall, use them as a reference when you model. Sort of like that. Then if we click on the wall here, you can see that our base constraint for this wall is a second floor, and then the top constraint is a roof, which is what we want. So if we go back into our 3D view, we can see that our wall for our second floor plan is drawn in. So now we want to maybe draw some interior walls. So I'm going to go back into my wall space here again. Click on probably about this 5-inch thick wall to represent like interior walls. And then I'll just start drawing in rooms. Now, if you want to keep track of the dimensions of your walls, you can go to the Annotate tab, and then just dimension the walls together. Center line is okay, just like that, and then it tells you the length of this building. So if I wanted to change it, I can even click on one of the walls that the dimension line references, and then type in like 60 feet, and that brings it to 60 feet in length. Another tip is maybe we want to distinguish our walls better and add like a poche to them. And we're going to do this just that. So if I click on VV for visibility graphics, we can go into our model categories tab, search up the wall category, and we can change the cut pattern to be a black poche. So if we go into walls, the cut section here, and click on override, I can change our cut pattern to be like a very solid color. And that just makes it much easier to see my walls. If we go back into our second floor plan, you see that we don't have that visibility graphic here. So you'll have to do VV again and then change up the graphics. So let's say you have a very rough draft outline of all your walls. We can start using the room placement command or the tool to estimate our square footage of each room, to figure out the square footage of each space. So if we go into the architecture tab here and click on room, we can hover over each room or space and create an area. So we have these room tags in place. And to display the square footage, we're going to have to change the type of the room tag. So if I click on the room tag category here, there's a room tag with an area, and that's what we want. So if we click on this, it shows us the square footage. And we can hold Control and click on the rest of the tags, and then change them to the same type. And you can see here that now we have the square footage we want. If you want to name your room, you would just click on the tag here, and then type in like bathroom, water, storage, etc. So before we advance on to putting in windows and doors and even floors, I'm just going to go ahead and polish up this model according to my functional analysis, and then we'll reconnect. So I'll speed up this video. All right. So now that we have our walls in, it's a good idea to put in our floors. If I click on this floor tab, I'm going to have the ability to create one. And for our first floor, we're going to set it at the ground floor and start drawing at the outline of our walls. So I'm just going to use the center line as a reference. And I'm going to use this pick line tool. And then just click on like 4 parts of the building. And then once I have all of the lines picked, I'm going to use the trim tool just to clean up my edges. Make sure they align correctly. Just like that. Then I'm also going to do it to the same building here. One thing we want to pay attention to is the type of the floor we're going to put in place. In this case, it's going to be a concrete slab. Typically, it wouldn't be 4-inch, more like 6-inch, but in this case, we'll just use it. And then after I have the type selected, verified the level, have the outline drawn, I'm just going to press OK. And then now we have our floor drawn in. Then now what we're going to do is draw in a floor for our second floor. But yeah, so I'm going to draw a floor. I'm going to set my level to second floor, and it already is. And I'm going to change the floor type to maybe just a generic 12-inch floor. I'm going to use the pick line tools again. So once we finish doing the second floor, it prompts us to check this option. And what this does is it, like all of the highlighted floors underneath here are going to touch our second floor wall, or I'm sorry, floor. So it's asking us if we want to attach those walls to our second floor, to which we'll click attach. And it's totally fine if it does something like that. You just press OK. So if we go back into our 3D view, we can see that there's our second floor already drawn in. One thing I'm going to do in this 3D view is also set the scope box to overall building, just so I don't see like the surrounding site too much, so it's easier to model. Oops. If it does something like this, that means our our scope box is a little too small. So if I unassign it and then adjust the scope box to be a little bit higher, we should be able to see everything else. So maybe a little bit lower too. I'll now assign this changed scope box to overall building. There we go. So now that we have our floors in place, we probably want to start thinking about stairs. And drawing stairs in Revit is pretty straightforward. There's like preset families that you don't have to like model every individual riser or tread from. But yeah, so if we go into our ground floor working view and then go into architecture and click the stair tab here, we'll be able to draw a stair in. So if I click into the space here, it's giving me this option where it brings me up to my second floor. So I want it to be like a half stair. I'm not sure what it's called, but it's like your stair ends here at the halfway point. There's a landing. So if you want to add a landing, we just kind of draw it in using this draw tab. And then estimate the width and height of our stair. Then after that, I'll finish up the stair by clicking on Run again, and then drawing it up here. If it does something like this, we can always move our stair to the edge of the landing. There we go. Then when it comes to maybe commercial stairs, we want to keep it at like 4'6". So if you click on the runs, you can adjust the width of these stairs. And then you can also adjust the width of your landing as well to be aligned with your stair. So you just want to double check that the base level is set to ground floor and then the top level is set to second floor. Because if it's not correctly set, the stair is going to go to like some random height. So if we press finish edit mode, we have a stair drawn in. If we go into 3D, we can see that it's right up here. So if I go back into my ground floor plan, I'm going to align this stair with my wall here. Then move it a little back. About here is okay. And then I'm also going to add a second stair over here. So one thing to make it super easy is you just hold Control and then go off to the side here and copy it over. And then you can use the Align tool, AL, to align your stair to where you want it to be. So now that we have the stair drawn in, if we go into our second floor plan, we want it to land somewhere. And it looks like we want our top landing to go here and connect with our outdoor balcony and second story here. So I'm actually going to draw in another floor and maybe, or actually even just edit my second story floor here. Go back into my second floor plan and then kind of draw like a landing over here. Okay, so now that we have our floors drawn in and I've adjusted my design option, we're going to start thinking about putting in openings such as windows and doors. So we probably want to start roughing in our doors. So if we click on the Store tab here, we have a bunch of different options we can choose from. But for now, I'm just going to go with a 36 by 80, just to keep it, uniform. And if you notice, it latches onto a wall, and you can just click and place it, which makes it very convenient. You can change the direction of the swing by clicking on these arrows here. So I'm going to make them outswing and even use the align tool to make them straight together. And you can see that these doors are placed in. As for windows, there are also multiple options you can select from too. If you don't find something you're looking for, you can always go into the Insert tab and load an Autodesk family and type in window. And you're given a larger range of options that you can choose from, like skylights, some casement windows here, etc. So for example, if I were to place a window maybe off to the side here in my storage room, it would represent in plan view. If you go into 3D view, kind of a little difficult to navigate around, but it's just located right here. So these are our doors. Now, one clever tool where you can customize like the size of your windows is using the curtain wall tool. So if we go into a wall here and change our type to this exterior glazing or storefront curtain wall, we're able to draw on top of our existing wall, and it creates this curtain wall here. You can adjust the height and the length of this window or this curtain wall, and if you want a better view of this window in elevation, you would have to make an elevation view by going into view, clicking on elevation here, and then just clicking off to the side. And you want to make sure that your elevation view is in plane with the wall here. So if I click on this elevation view reference, we can see the curtain wall that we put in. This kind of feels a little bit too tall for me, and it would be going into the framing of our second story here. So I'm just going to make it, I'm actually going to remove the top constraint, make it unconnected, and then put it to about 10 feet. And then maybe 3 feet off the ground. Sometimes you have to do a little math. So like if you want your curtain wall to stop like 2 feet under the second floor, you would do some math. So I'm going to change the unconnected height to about 8 feet. There we go. So now that we have our curtain wall customized, you definitely have a lot of freedom in how you want to design them. But what I can quickly do is just hold Control, drag it down another side of my wall, and then that gives me a very quick way of making windows. So that's basically a mini introduction to curtain walls. One thing I also probably want to cover is the idea that you can adjust your mullions, which are these thin metal strips here. So if you hit Tab and hover over this mullion, you'll find this dotted hidden line here. This is a reference line for the mullion, so if you unpin this element by clicking unpin, which can also be found right here, you can adjust your mullion. Then you can always relock it. And yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and speed up this video and then just kind of show the process of how I place my openings. But yeah. All right, cool. So now that we have our openings placed down, we want to start doing roofs. It's pretty straightforward and follows the same like construction format or modeling format as a floor. So if I go into my second floor plan here, click on roof, I can start drawing or outlining my roof. So I'm going to use the pick line tools and this time go along the outline of my building. And go over the outline of this part of my building as well. I have these two masses of roof um, created. So if we click on the line here, we're given a couple options. One thing we want to pay attention to is this define roof button and also the slope setting here. So I want my roof to be like a gable roof, so I don't want these lines here to define my slope. A ratio of like 9 inches to 12 inches is a pretty high slope, so I'm just going to change it to like 3, and then do the same for this as well. I'm also going to undefine the roof slope here, press OK. Oh, so if we run into this problem, that means we should only be modeling like one roof at a time. So if you want to save our progress here, I'm just going to select all my lines here, right click it, or actually press Control C and then delete it. Then press OK here. And then now what I'm going to do is go into my roof command again. I'm going to click on this paste option here and click align to current view. And that puts my other roof in that I had drawn in previously. So if we go into our 3D view here, we can see that our roof is not particularly defined where we want it to be. And that's because it's not set at the level where it should be. So we're actually going to set it to the base level of the roof here, just like that. Then also match it with our other roof here. And right now it's kind of looking like I want to extend the slope of this roof. And maybe even change up the level so it's a little bit shorter because 12 feet is actually kind of large from what I see. So I'll change that to 10 feet real quick. I'll adjust this to be like 3 feet from the base. Alright, so I'm going to adjust the slope of my roof to be maybe 5 and 12. It makes it much steeper, and maybe I even want it to be a little bit taller. Like 612. Cool. So now that we have our roof in place, we can see that the walls here are not very connected to our roof. So there's this neat button here called Attach Top Base, and if we click on that, we can attach our roof to our wall here. And we want to repeat that with all of our walls. So I'm just going to select all of my exterior walls. And then go back into my 3D view, attach top base to my roof here, and then press OK. Cool. So now that we have our roof modeled, one thing that I want to teach you guys is changing up the footprint of our wall here, because I want to open up this a lot, but as you can see, there's no air or open space within here. So there's a couple options you can go about it. You can even like reduce the footprint of the wall to just be like this, or double click your wall in your 3D view, and you can use the line tool here to draw openings. And that creates a specific opening within your drawn wall. I'm going to connect this. So you may notice around here that the wall is not necessarily overlapping between our drawn floor here. You can supplement that issue by changing up or using that tool we just learned and using the pick line tool to go along the base of our floor here. So if I use a trim tool and create like that little undulation, we'll cover that part of the wall for me. Cool. So now that we have that, what I'm going to do is finish up and polish this Revit model, and then we'll recircle back and do some framing. But yeah. Okay, so I have a very rough 3D model of my building. And there are a couple things I forgot to mention earlier, so I'll just kind of put them in now. And that's adding railings and also adjusting our site model to accommodate our slab. So first we're going to go over railings. To add a railing, it's pretty simple. You just go into architecture, click on this railing button here, use a pick line tool, and then just kind of go off to based off this edge here. We want to make sure it's set to our second floor because this is where our balcony is, and now I'm going to press OK, and that creates our railing. Maybe something I want to do is also cover this entire balcony area. So I'm going to make another roof gable. And just create like a very quick roof on the second floor. All right, cool. So to continue our railing, to add another, we just click on the railing family again. Use pick line. Make sure it's assigned to our second story. And then also make sure our railing only goes to the point where we need it. So now that we have that, we're going to go ahead and adjust our site model. So if I go into my site plan, maybe even my ground floor plan here, our floor here overlaps with our site model here, and we don't want that. So what I'm actually going to do is edit our site model and make sure I'm clicking on the right family. So it's our ground. I guess it's not modeled. Oh. Well, that's fine. Okay, cut. So one thing we can also do in modeling our site is adding the concrete work around our building. So I'm actually going to go ahead and create another floor and just make it this like 4-inch concrete slab and just kind of draw an outline of where I want my concrete to be. All right, so now that I have an outline of my concrete area or where my pavement is going to be, I'm just going to press OK, and now we have a concrete thing here. So it seems like it's not showing some of the site here, and maybe it's because our scope box is not all right, so now that we have our concrete drawn in, we can see that it's butting up with our site model over here. Now, one thing we can do is either edit the site model and directly edit the footprint of our site here and use a pick line tool to kind of like etch the rough carving of the building into the site. But another thing we can do just to make it a little bit easier is changing up our extrusion end to be -1 inch. And that just makes sure our things here stand out. But yeah. So the next step in this, or something I'd like to also show you, is modeling the framing of your building. Or just at the very least, the rough parts of it.
All right, so now it's time to kind of model the structure. And I'm not going to go too in depth in it, but we'll just learn a couple techniques for placing things like beams, columns, etc. So one of the first things I probably want to do is create a structural plan. So to do that, I'll go into View here, click on Plan View, and then create a structural plan. And I want to create one of pretty much all of my floor plans here. So I'll hold Shift and select all of these and press OK. And now if we go into our project browser, we can see that we have structural views. And then before we start placing columns, we want to make sure to have a couple grid lines just to make sure our structure is organized. So to create those, you're going to go into architecture here, go into grid, and for now we can just work with the center line of our wall, and you can just click off into here. To create another one, just click on grid again, click on a point, and yeah. So I'll forward this part of the video, and I'll just place a couple grids down. And then for these grids, they also show up in your second floor plan, which is super helpful. You don't have to replace them again. But yeah, so. Okay, so now that we have our grid lines placed in, they're a little bit messy, but that's fine. We can start placing our columns. So one thing we want to do before placing our column is to import like a column family. And we'll go back into our load Autodesk family function here. And I'm going to search up, I'd already searched it up before, but a timber column. So I'll click on this, then I'll press load, and it's going to give me a couple options that I want to load in. For now, I'm just going to go with the 6x6 and press OK. So let's say, okay, so now that we have our grid lines placed and our column loaded in, we're going to click on the column function. We're going to click this at grid intersection button. And what it does is it allows me to click on the grid lines that I placed and create a column. So I'm going to do that for the rest of these little intersections here. And one tip that you want to keep note of is that you hold Control to create more of them. So I'm going to hold Control, click on grid lines, and watch as they get placed. So now that we have all of our columns on the first floor place, we're just going to press Finish, and it created these columns for us. So at this condition, it's a little weird. So what I'm actually going to do is throw this specific column into the wall, and then also do another column right over here. And I'll also do the same right here. Now, if we wanted to view this in 3D, what we can do is make a copy of our 3D view. And we're going to adjust the visibility graphics so we can only see the structure. So if I type in VV for visibility graphics, I'm going to select all of these categories. If you have this selected, just scroll down, hold Shift and click down, and then uncheck that. And then now what I'm going to do is turn on only my structure, which is this area right here. Then I'm going to press OK. And we can see that we have our columns placed down. So let's say I want to do my second floor columns, and that's actually pretty easy. We're going to repeat doing the column command again, add grids, and just hold Control, click on there. And again, I have a little bit of a weird condition here, so I'll just shove my column into the wall, and then add another column right here. So if we go back to our 3D view with the structure, we can see 2 levels of columns. Now, I'm going to rename this view to show like structural 3D. And after that, we're going to start placing some of our beams. Now, if we go back into our structural plan, ground floor structural, we have the option of importing timber beams. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Insert, Load Autodesk Family, and click on this timber option here. I'm just going to do probably a 6x10. Press OK. And then now that they're loaded in, I can start loading in my beams. So we're going to go along the edge of the wall. I'm sorry, along these grid lines here. So we're going to actually click on grids again. And I'm just going to click these grid lines and make sure to hold Control when doing so. I'm going to press Finish. And if we go into our structural, we can see that the columns are placed. So I made a small mistake, and let's say you accidentally modeled your columns, but they're referenced in the wrong level. That's pretty easily fixable. So if I click on this, like all of my upper columns here, I can see that they're intended to be on my second floor and go up to my roof, but they're not. So I'm just going to make sure that it's referencing the right level. So I'm going to make sure it goes up to roof. I'm going to set the base offset to 0, and I'm going to press Apply. That brings it up. Now these columns, they can also be adjusted to go up to the second floor, an offset of 0, press Apply, and there we go. And to correct our beams, we can just click on them, start level offset to be, let's say, at about 11 feet, and then also set it to be 11 feet. And that brings up our columns. So I'm going to continue with my beam placement and just fast forward the video. Then we'll move on to the next portion. So now that I have my beams and columns placed in, we're actually going to do a little bit of more structural work and use this tool called a beam system. So one of the first things I probably want to do, if I go back into my regular 3D view here, is to model the rafters that go along the roof. So to do that, I'm actually going to go into my 3D view here, and we're going to adjust maybe our section box, bring it up so that we only see the bottom of our roof here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to click on this beam system here. We're going to set our work plane by using pick a plane and then hovering over our roof until we select the inside face of it. After that, we're going to start establishing the boundary of our beam system. So using the pick line tool, I'll click on the edge of the inside face of the roof, just like that. Maybe clicking out here. Until I have a rectangular looking boundary. Now what I'm going to do is make sure that I have my timber frame selected, my beam selected. We can adjust the spacing to be about 6 feet on center, but maybe I'll just do 5 feet. And then I'm going to press apply and then do finish edit mode. And he creates beams for me. Now we can kind of see that maybe this isn't the timber beam that we want. So I'm going to load in maybe a smaller timber beam. Let's do a 6x8. And then we can click back on our beam system and adjust the type of beam. It seems like there are some instances where our beams here are not matching the rafters out here. Like there's not a very good joint. So what I'm going to do is go back to my 3D view of my structure. And then I'm actually going to adjust the boundary of my beam so the rafters go up to here. So if I go back into my 3D view, I'll click on my beam system here and just bring the boundary line to be about to match the edge here. Okay, so now that I have this portion modeled, I'm now going to model the other portion of this. We're going to use the same step by going to Structure, Beam System. We're going to set our plane to be this part of the roof. And then what I'm actually going to do is actually just draw a rectangle to about right here. After that, I'm going to make sure all of my desired spaces are, or all of my desired properties are selected. I'm going to make it 6x8, on center, fixed distance of 5 feet, and press OK. And then it creates those beams for me. If it's not aligning how I want it to be, I can always click on my beam system again. If it'll allow me to. And adjust the boundary to be on the inside face of this, and the inside face of that. Then my beams should be aligned right here. Oh, so when you do this kind of stuff, and if you go into your structural view, you can see that there's probably a lot of stuff to be modeled in. And the level of detail that you go into should be up to you. And of course, I'm not like a structural engineer, so there's a lot of like design gaps that I probably should take into account for. But yeah, this is just going over the techniques of how to model the structure. Then I'll go ahead and model some more and clean it up, and then we'll move on to doing furniture. But yeah. All right, so now that we have a little bit of our structure modeled in, we're gonna go over furniture. And this is a pretty fun part, and doing it is pretty simple. So to do it, you always wanna make sure that you're importing some families. To do that, we'll again go to Load Autodesk Family, and let's say if we wanted something like sofa, it would give us this option. So if I click on that, press load, and go into my components button, it gives me the option of placing a sofa. And then to rotate pieces of furniture, you would just use the rotate tool. Go like that. And yeah, so it's just kind of this process of uploading things like desks, chairs, etc. into your components library of your model, and then putting them in. So I'm going to go ahead and speed up myself doing that, and yeah, we'll reconnect. One technique that we can use is this array tool. So let's say you want to have multiple instances of the same furniture. You would just click on this array tool, and let's say we want to have a direction of 6 desks going through here. So I'm going to set a couple options here, like move to seconds. Maybe I want 6, and then I'm just going to click, define a distance between each one, so about 3 foot 5, and it creates these. Then let's say if I want to create an array of these ones, I'll just click on this, define a distance like about 4 foot 6, and then I'll say about 6 of these in this array, or maybe about 5. And after that, um, yeah, so I'll continue placing furniture. All right, so now that we have some furniture placed in, um, we're going to now apply some materials so that we're actually seeing color here.
So there are a couple ways of doing it. First way is teaching you how to adjust the material of your walls to match like a certain color. Then we'll also be using the paint tool to kind of paint like some last minute surfaces. So first thing we want to do is edit a wall. And I kind of want it to be like vertical wood siding. So I'm going to edit my basic wall type here. And if we go into edit structure, I already have some layers set up here. So adjusting layers and walls allows you to create like different materials like plywood, finish, like metal cladding, stuff like that. So I already created these ones, and to create another one, you just click on insert. And for example, if you wanted like a interior finish, you would put it at the lowest level, which is below the structure or the wooden framing. And you would just bring that down. And then after that, you can define the material of your structure by clicking on those 3 dots and then creating a new material or choosing a material that already exists in your project library. For now, I'm just going to delete this and have you replicate the layers here and then probably match the thicknesses. And then you want to make sure that stays uniformly 8 inches. Make sure it's 8 inches total. I'm going to adjust my wooden cladding that I named here by assigning it a new material, and I already made one. So in this wooden cladding here, I have a color defined, and I also have a surface pattern defined. So I assigned it an 8-inch parallel vertical, and that should reflect on my surface here. I'm also going to adjust the interior layer, the interior surface of my wall, and I'm just going to create a new one called white interior finish. I'll make the color a white color, and then it doesn't really need a surface pattern because it's just kind of going to be like a white finish. So if I press OK, what it's going to do is it's going to adjust all of the colors of my walls here. So if we change the display mode to like consistent colors, we can see that that wooden material is reflected. So let's say for our roof, we can do the same thing. If we go to edit type, edit our structure here, and then break down this 1-foot thickness into different layers, we can create the same colors. So if we go to insert, bring this specific tab up above my core boundary, maybe I'll make the thickness about 6 inches, or how about 2? I'll make my interior structure area like 6 inches. And I'll insert another structure and bring it down, make it about 2 inches. Now I'm going to assign it the materials I did for my wall here by clicking on wood cladding on the outside, and then also a white plaster inside. If I press OK, now that wall type is reflected as that color. And it doesn't necessarily matter what, like if your colors aren't super uniform, because in renderings you can always adjust how it looks. But what's important is that we differentiate like all the colors that exist here. So let's say I also want to adjust my floor, and I'll edit the type to maybe be a wooden flooring. I'm going to break this up again. I'm going to do insert, bring the structure up, make it like a wood stained pattern. I'll make the thickness maybe about 2 inches. I'll make my structure 8, and then I'll duplicate this structure, bring it down, define it to be about 2 inches. Something you also want to do is change the function. So top one is like finish 2, bottom one is finish 1. And I'll make this the white, or maybe even the wood. Probably the teak. Then I'll press OK. If this happens, that means your structure probably isn't the right measurement. So in this case, I actually want it to be 8 inches, not 8 feet. So that's fine. Cool. So let's say you have a bunch of surfaces here that you can't seem to color. There's this clever tool called the paint tool. And this allows you to paint individual surfaces without having to change like the type of the structure. So let's say I want to match that wood cladding all over the edges of my roof. So I'll type in wood cladding, find that material, and then I'll just start painting over my surfaces here. If you can't seem to find a surface, just hold tab or hit tab and then just click over. So I'll fast forward this video just to show you my process, and then we'll reconnect after, and we'll do a little bit of cleanup on our views just so that they're ready for post-production. So now that we have that, and maybe you define most of the materials that you wanted, um, final step would just to start, to start cleaning up your views for post-production. So I'm going to start working off of my presentation views here and just start cleaning them up. So I don't want to see this CAD line, so I'll hide it. I don't want to see any annotation elements either, so I'm going to hide it by category. And I'm going to do the same for grid lines. We don't want to see this up button, and when you click on a stair, sometimes there's an option for you to unclick the text in the stairs. I'm going to maybe increase my crop region to be a bit bigger, or I'm sorry, my scope box, just so I can see uh, where I'm at. Cool. So I also don't want to see maybe this texture over here. So I'm actually going to override my graphics in view. Or actually, we're going to do a little trick here. We're going to go into visibility graphics, and we're going to make our concrete or our floor family have a solid white pattern. So if I go into patterns here and click on override, I'm going to set it to solid fill and be white. And I'm going to do the same for this site category. So this specific component was modeled in the site. So I'm going to go ahead and click VV, type in site, and if you see the site model category here, you're going to click on override and make it a white solid color. And then now you have a clean graphic that you can work from. Now I'm going to do the same for my second floor plan. So I'm going to go into my second floor plan presentation and do the same thing I did earlier. I also don't really want to show a lot of detail in this in the farm office here since it's an existing building. So I'm actually going to create a um, a masking region to cover up this area. So I'm just going to create a rectangle and just drag it over the inside face of the wall here. And then I'm going to press OK. And that basically hides it. Now if I wanted to maybe make it just more of a, make the walls behind it like a grayer color, I can just right click it, click on override graphics and view by element, and just increase the surface transparency of it to maybe be like 20. And what this does is it makes the walls here a little bit more visible. If I wanted to create a, now if I didn't want that masking region and just wanted my existing building to be like a, get rid of the masking region. So let's say I don't want to see that masking region and I actually just want to see like a very faint outline of the existing building here. I can create what's called a filled region. And if I were to create a new type by clicking on edit type, duplicate, and maybe labeling it solid white and press OK, I can create a custom type of filled region. So let's say I want my foreground fill pattern to be a solid color and have it be white. And then I'll press the background pattern color is totally fine. And then I'll just use a pick lines tool to find the outline of the building here. You can also adjust the line weight of your boundary lines of this detail region. And in this case, I'm going to make it maybe medium lines and then just press OK. And this covers up the building for me. I can even adjust this a little bit to be a little bit thicker. Maybe make it wide lines and then just press OK. So this wide line area is where our existing building is. Cool. Maybe I don't want to see like the walls behind it, so I'm just gonna like hold shift and hide these walls. And then maybe medium line is okay. Cool. So now we've cleaned up these views that we can now use to create our floor plans, which we'll do in the next section. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and yeah, enjoy.